Our house isn't just clean. It's curated. Every object has its place. Every surface gleams. It's a testament to my husband, Marcus. He's a man who thrives on order, on perfection. For the 10 years we've been married, I've seen this not as a flaw, but as a byproduct of his brilliance. He's a high-powered investment banker, a man who builds empires out of chaos, so it only made sense that his home life would be his sanctuary of perfect control. I chose to see it as romantic, a sign of how much he cherished the life we'd built. Looking back now, I can see that my core flaw wasn't just that I ignored the red flags. It was that I actively chose to weave them into a prettier picture. I was living in a beautiful, gilded cage, and had convinced myself it was a castle. I remember last Tuesday, I came home to find him in our library, a faint frown on his face as he rearranged a shelf of books. They were organized by author, I'd said with a small laugh. He didn't look up. They're more aesthetically pleasing when organized by color and spine height, he'd replied, his voice calm, absolute. As if there was no other correct way for them to be. Later that evening, he'd kissed my forehead and told me I was the perfect wife, the perfect partner who allowed him to focus on building their future. It sounded like a compliment, but now the words curdle in my memory. He wasn't praising me. He was praising a well-behaved prop. The illusion began to crack yesterday. Marcus had been hinting for weeks about a huge surprise for our 10th anniversary. All he'd tell me was that I needed to find my passport. I started searching my desk, a space that was usually a creative, chaotic mess. But it was strangely neat. He'd helpfully reorganized it for me over the weekend, stacking my notebooks into sterile piles and aligning all my pens. A flicker of real annoyance, hot and sharp, went through me, but I swallowed it down like I always did. He's just trying to help, I told myself. This is what he does. I couldn't find the passport anywhere. Not in my desk, not in our bedroom, not in the hall closet. Have you checked my office? He called from the other room. Maybe I put it in there for safekeeping. His office was his inner sanctum. A room I rarely entered. It was immaculate, of course. A huge mahogany desk, polished to a mirror shine, a wall of perfectly aligned books, and a single expensive orchid on the windowsill. It smelled of leather and money. There was no clutter, no chaos, no sign of the man I thought I knew. It was the office of a stranger. I checked the desk drawers, each one a testament to his obsession with order. But there was no passport. And that's when my search for a simple document became something else entirely. I stood in the center of his perfect office, a sense of unease crawling up my spine. The passport wasn't here, but something else was. I could feel it. And then a memory surfaced, hazy and insignificant at the time, but suddenly sharp and clear now. It was from a few months ago. We were hosting a dinner party, and one of the guests, a history professor, had been admiring the row of antique leather-bound books on the top shelf of Marcus's bookshelf. As Marcus was pontificating about their rarity, I'd seen him do something odd. He'd tap the wall behind the books, a quick, almost subconscious little rhythm with his knuckles, as if checking for something. At the time, I dismissed it as just another one of his strange little tics. Now it felt like a clue. My eyes went to the bookshelf. The top shelf. A row of identical 19th century legal encyclopedias that he'd once told me never to touch, as they were too fragile. My heart started to beat a little faster. This felt wrong. This felt like a violation of the silent, unspoken rules of our carefully curated life. But the unease, the feeling that something was deeply wrong in this perfect house, was stronger. I grabbed the small stepladder from the corner and climbed up. The books were heavy, much heavier than they looked, their leather spines cool and smooth under my fingers. I lifted the first one out, then the second, my muscles straining. As I removed the third book, I saw it. Faint, almost invisible scuff marks on the deep burgundy wallpaper, right where the corner of something square had scraped against it. It was the unmistakable, perfectly geometric outline of a wall safe. I climbed down, my hands trembling. A safe. Why would Marcus have a secret safe? We had a main safe downstairs for our important documents, our jewelry. A safe we both had the combination to. This was something else. This was his, and his alone. My mind raced as I stood before the keypad. What would the combination be? My first thought, the romantic, hopeful one, was our anniversary. I typed in the numbers. 0815. Nothing. A small red light blinked mockingly. Okay, his birthday. 1204. Nothing. My birthday. Or 522. Nothing. My heart was pounding now, a frantic, desperate rhythm against my ribs. I felt a surge of panic. He would be home soon. I leaned my head against the cool wall, trying to think. What was important to Marcus? Truly deeply important? What was the date that he held up as the cornerstone of his entire existence? And then it hit me. A thought so cynical and sad it almost made me laugh. It wasn't our anniversary. It wasn't my birthday. It was the date he closed the Henderson deal. The first multi-million-dollar acquisition that had launched his career into the stratosphere. A date he celebrated every year with a bottle of ridiculously expensive scotch. A date he talked about more than the day we got married. With a feeling of grim certainty, I climbed the ladder again and typed in the numbers. 0927. There was a soft electronic whir and then a solid, satisfying click. The heavy steel door swung open. I peered inside, my mind braced for, I don't know what. Piles of cash? Secret documents? Something that would explain this hidden part of his life. But the inside of the safe was almost completely empty. There were no jewels, no stacks of money, no secret files. There was just one object sitting dead center on the gray felt lining, a single thick black binder. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that whatever secrets this house held, they were inside. My hands were shaking as I reached into the safe. The binder was cool to the touch, its black plastic cover impersonal and cold. For a moment, my mind, still desperately clinging to normalcy, tried to rationalize. It's just business papers, I thought. Something he needs to keep secure. It was the last gasp of the woman I used to be, the one who always found a way to make his strange behavior fit into the perfect picture of our life. I took the binder back to his desk and sat in his imposing leather chair. It felt wrong, like I was an intruder in my own home. I opened the cover. The first page was a simple, typed label on a tab divider. It just had my name on it, Clara. My breath caught in my throat. I flipped the tab. The page underneath was a high-quality, glossy photograph. It was of me, walking out of my yoga class last Tuesday, my hair still damp, a water bottle in my hand. It was taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. I looked, unaware, happy. I turned the page. Another photo. Me in the produce aisle of the grocery store, frowning at an avocado. Another. Me laughing with my sister at an outdoor cafe, my head tilted back in a moment of pure joy. Each one was time-stamped in the corner. Each one was a moment of my life, stolen and cataloged without my knowledge. A cold, crawling sensation, a feeling of being watched, of being hunted, crept over my skin. My hands were trembling so badly now it was hard to turn the pages. I flipped to the next tab. This one was labeled Assets. It wasn't a list of our shared accounts. It was a terrifyingly detailed spreadsheet of my family's finances. My parents' retirement portfolio, the estimated value of their home, even a note about my sister's recent promotion. He had been researching them. And then I saw the page dedicated to me. It was a copy of my life insurance policy. I remembered him bringing it up a few months ago, sitting at our kitchen table, his voice full of calm, responsible concern. Clara, darling, he'd said, we need to be practical. We should increase your coverage. It's just smart planning for the future. I had agreed without a second thought. Now, staring at the policy number, I saw the coverage amount. $2 million. I felt a wave of dizziness. This wasn't planning. This was an appraisal. He had been calculating my worth. My fingers, numb and clumsy, fumbled to the final tab. The label on this one made the air leave my lungs in a single silent gasp. It read, Contingency Plan. I turned the page. It was a topographical map of a remote hiking trail, a place called Devil's Ridge I'd never even heard of. A route was highlighted in yellow, leading to a specific scenic overlook, which was circled in red. Next to the circle, in Marcus's neat, precise architectural handwriting, were a series of chilling notes. Geological instability. Loose rock formations. Poor cellular reception. And below that, a projected timeline culminating in a single, final entry. Estimated time of call to emergency services, 4:30 p.m. My world tilted on its axis. The perfect room, the perfect house, the perfect life, it all dissolved into a soundless, screaming vortex of terror. I turned to the very last page in the binder. It was a freshly printed copy of my life insurance policy. And at the bottom of the page, the $2 million payout amount was circled. Not once but twice, in thick, viscous red ink, and then I heard it, the familiar, horrifying crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. The soft hum of his engine cutting out. The electronic beep of the front door being unlocked. He was home. A jolt of pure animal adrenaline shot through me. My mind went completely blank, all thought replaced by a single primal command. Hide it. My movements were a frantic, clumsy scramble. I shoved the binder back into the safe, my fumbling fingers barely able to slam the heavy door shut. I spun the dial, my breath catching in my throat. I scrambled up the stepladder, shoving the heavy books back onto the shelf, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped one. I prayed they were in the right order, that he wouldn't notice. I jumped down, kicked the ladder back into the corner, and took one last, wild-eyed look around the perfect, silent office. I smoothed my shirt, wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans, and walked out into the hallway, forcing my lips into a shape that I hoped resembled a smile. He was standing in the foyer, shrugging off his coat, looking handsome and powerful and completely normal. Hey, darling, he said, his own smile effortless. Any luck with that passport? I had to stand there and look into the eyes of the man who had just been planning my murder, and I had to pretend that everything was perfect. Somehow, I made it through the next hour. I don't know how. I moved through our perfect house like a ghost, an actor in a play I didn't know I was cast in. I found my passport in my travel bag in the back of my closet, exactly where I'd left it, and waved it at him with a shaky, triumphant smile. Found it! I'd chirped, my voice sounding impossibly high and brittle. He'd just smiled his perfect, handsome smile and said, Excellent. Now we can finalize things. The word finalize hung in the air between us, charged with a meaning only I understood. Dinner was a masterclass in psychological torture. He'd opened a bottle of our favorite wine, the expensive kind we saved for special occasions. He'd cooked my favorite meal, a seafood risotto that must have taken him hours. Every gesture was a perfect pantomime of a loving husband. And every gesture was a lie. He raised his glass, the crystal catching the light from the chandelier overhead. "To us," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners in that way that had always made my heart melt. To 10 perfect years, and to many, many more to come. My hand trembled as I lifted my own glass. The clink of our glasses hitting was a sound of shattering glass in my mind. I took a sip of wine, the rich, fruity liquid tasting like ash in my mouth. Many more years to come. The lie was so audacious, so bold, it almost took my breath away. I had to fight the urge to flinch, to recoil, to scream. Instead, I just smiled. The perfect wife, I thought, a bitter, hysterical laugh bubbling in my chest. "He's right. I'm a damn good actress. So," he said, casually swirling the wine in his glass, "I can finally tell you about this surprise." He leaned forward, his face a mask of boyish excitement. "I've booked us a little getaway. A place upstate. Very remote, very private. There's this incredible hiking trail I found online, Devil's Ridge. The reviews say the views are to die for," he winked. "And the cliffs. Apparently they're dangerously high. You know how you love a bit of a thrill." I stared at him, my fork hovering over my plate. I searched his face, his eyes, looking for any crack in the facade, any flicker of the monster I now knew was lurking beneath. But there was nothing. There was only Marcus, my charming, handsome, successful husband, the man I had loved for a decade. The mask was perfect. It was seamless. And in that moment, I understood a truly terrifying truth. He wasn't pretending. In his own mind, he wasn't a monster. He was just curating his life. And I was the part of the collection that was about to be put into storage. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe. The walls of our perfect dining room, with its perfect silk wallpaper and its perfect gleaming furniture, felt like they were closing in on me. I put my hand to my temple, feigning a sudden pain. "You know what, Marcus," I said, my voice thin, reedy. I think I have a bit of a headache coming on. All the stress of the week, I guess. I'm going to go lie down for a few minutes." He looked at me, a flicker of something, annoyance, suspicion, in his eyes, but it was gone in a second, replaced by his usual look of solicitous concern. "Of course, darling. You go rest. I'll clean up." I stumbled away from the table and fled to the master bathroom, the one room in the house with a solid, old-fashioned lock. I shut the heavy oak door and turned the bolt, the thunk of the metal sliding into place, the first truly safe sound I had heard all day. I leaned my back against the cool wood, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. My reflection in the mirror was a stranger, a woman with wide, terrified eyes and a face as white as a sheet. The game had been set. The board was laid out. He had made his move. And as I stood there trembling in the silent gilded cage of my bathroom, I realized that this was no longer a marriage. It was a hunt. And if I wanted to survive, I had to stop being the prey. I had to become the hunter. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The woman who used to treasure her slow, quiet mornings with a cup of coffee and a book was gone. In her place was a soldier. I moved through the silent house, every creak of a floorboard a potential threat. Marcus was still asleep, a peaceful, handsome stranger in our bed. I looked at his face on the pillow and felt nothing. The love, the history, it had all been cauterized, burned away by the truth I'd found in that safe. I knew I couldn't trust anyone in our shared life. Our friends were his friends, business associates he'd curated over the years. My own family adored him. He was the successful, charming son-in-law they'd always dreamed of. To go to any of them with this insane, unbelievable story, they'd think I was having a breakdown. They'd call him full of concern, and then he would know. And then I would be dead. I had to operate completely outside the world he had built around me. That morning, I told him I was going to a new yoga studio across town. Instead, I drove to a big box electronics store in a neighboring city. I walked through the automatic doors, my heart pounding, feeling like a spy in a cheap movie. I paid cash, a significant chunk of the emergency money I kept hidden from him, for a prepaid burner phone and the cheapest laptop they had. I created a new anonymous email address at a coffee shop 2 towns over, using their public Wi-Fi. This was my new life, a secret, digital existence completely firewalled from Marcus. That night, after he was asleep, I sat in my car in a deserted 24-hour laundromat parking lot, the cheap laptop glowing in the dark. It was time to see what other secrets he was hiding. I knew his passwords were never personal. They weren't about us or our life together. They were always about him, his triumphs, his achievements. I navigated to his cloud storage login and typed in the name of the company from his first major acquisition, followed by the year. Henderson 2014, access granted. I was in. Folders and files, all neatly organized, of course, filled my screen. Most of it was boring, business proposals, market analyses. But then I found a folder labeled Personal Finances, and it was password protected, encrypted. Tried all my usual guesses. Nothing. This was something he really didn't want anyone to see. There was only one person I could trust. One person who existed completely outside of Marcus's orbit, who had the skills I needed, and who had no love for my husband. My sister, Maya. We hadn't been close in years. She was a cybersecurity expert, a white hat hacker who lived in a different state and a different world. She'd always found Marcus to be smug and condescending, and the feeling was mutual. The rift between us had been a quiet casualty of my perfect marriage. I took a deep breath and called her on the burner phone. Clara? She answered, her voice full of surprise. What is this weird number? Maya, I need your help, I said, my voice low, urgent. And you have to promise me you won't ask any questions. Not yet, I could hear the suspicion in her silence. But then she must have heard the genuine ragged edge of fear in my voice. Okay, she said slowly. What do you need? I'm sending you a file from an anonymous email, I said. It's encrypted. I need you to break it. I need to know what's inside. Clara, what is going on? She pressed. You sound terrified. I am, I whispered, the admission a crack in my carefully constructed armor. Maya, I think I'm in a lot of trouble. She didn't hesitate. Okay, I'm on it. I'll set up a secure end-to-end encrypted chat for us. Don't use your regular phone. Don't use your home Wi-Fi. Use the burner. I'll have something for you in a few hours. I sent her the file. And then I sat in that dark, lonely parking lot and waited. 2 hours later, a message popped up on my new laptop through the secure chat she'd created. It was from her. Clara, I'm in, the message read. These aren't just personal finances. This is a mountain of hidden debt. Credit cards, unsecured loans, margin calls. He's leveraged to the hilt. He's projecting an image of wealth, but based on this, he's on the verge of complete collapse. So that was it. The motive. The $2 million life insurance policy wasn't just a bonus. It was a bailout. A solution to a problem he couldn't solve any other way. A cold, hard certainty settled in my gut. But Maya's next message showed me that the truth was so much worse than I could have possibly imagined. There's another folder in here, she wrote. It's hidden, partitioned off. The encryption is different, more personal. I'm working on it now. But Clara, what is the Amelia Project? The Amelia Project. The words hung there on the screen, cold and clinical. I typed back, my fingers stiff and clumsy. I don't know. Can you get in? Maya's response came a few minutes later. It's a bitch. But I'm working on it. Give me an hour. It was the longest hour of my life. I sat in the humming silence of the laundromat parking lot, watching the occasional car drift by, feeling completely disconnected from the normal world. My life wasn't about yoga classes and dinner parties anymore. It was about burner phones and encrypted files and a growing, gnawing certainty that the man I had married was a monster. Finally, a new message popped up in the secure chat. I'm in. A second later, a file began to download. It was a single, consolidated PDF. I clicked it open, and my world, which I thought had already been shattered, somehow broke all over again. It wasn't a project. It was a person. Amelia. The file opened with a photo of a beautiful woman with warm, smiling eyes and a cascade of dark hair. And underneath her picture was a dossier, a file just as thick, just as meticulously researched as the one he had on me. But this one was different. It wasn't an appraisal for death. It was an audition for a new life. It detailed her family's social standing, her Ivy League education, her career in art curation. It even had a section on her suitability as a mother, noting her desire for children. He wasn't just having an affair. He was casting my replacement. The next section was a log of their emails, stretching back nearly a year. I read them, my vision blurring, my breath catching in my throat. It was a masterclass in manipulation. To Amelia, he was a tragic, noble hero, a man trapped in a difficult marriage to a fragile, unstable wife. That was me. I was the villain in the story he was telling her. He wrote about my mood swings, my lack of ambition, his desperate attempts to hold our marriage together. He promised her, over and over, that he would be free from his obligations soon, and then their real life, their perfect life, could begin. But it was the very last document in the file that finally, truly, broke me. It was a draft, written in the cold corporate language of a press release. The headline read, "Announcing the Clara Anderson Foundation for Women's Art." My stomach dropped. It went on to describe a new charitable foundation, created by a grieving but resilient Marcus Anderson, to honor the memory of his beloved, tragically deceased wife. It talked about preserving my legacy, my supposed passion for the arts, and there, listed as a founding board member, was Amelia's name. I had to physically clap my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about replacing me. My death, my accidental tragic death, was a calculated, necessary public relations move. It was the plot point that would allow him to pivot from his old life to his new one, not as a villain, but as a hero. He would be the grieving widower, a noble man channeling his pain into charity, with the beautiful, supportive Amelia by his side. It was perfect. It was seamless, and it was all built on my grave. The woman who had willfully ignored the red flags for a decade was gone, burned away by the cold, hard reality on the screen in front of me. I wasn't just an obstacle to be removed. I was a character to be written out of the story. And in that moment, sitting in the dark in my car, I knew that my survival depended on one high-risk, terrifying move. I had to find a way to contact Amelia. I had to make her see that she wasn't being courted. She was being groomed. Going to the police wasn't an option. Not yet. All I had was a collection of digital files downloaded in a laundromat parking lot. It was circumstantial. Marcus, with his army of expensive lawyers and his perfect public image, would shred me. He would paint me as exactly the person he'd described to Amelia, the jealous, unstable, vindictive wife. I could just hear him, his voice dripping with false sincerity, telling the detectives how I'd fabricated this insane story because I couldn't handle our marriage ending. He was too smart, too slick. I couldn't fight him on his home turf. I had to create a new front. I needed an ally. And the only potential ally I had was the woman he had chosen to replace me. It was the most dangerous gamble of my life. She could forward my email directly to him. She could expose my entire secret investigation. But as I sat there in the dark, the cold logic of survival took over. I had to risk it. Because Amelia wasn't just my replacement. She was his next victim. She just didn't know it yet. Using my anonymous email account, I composed the first message. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my mind racing. It had to be simple, direct, enough to plant a seed of doubt without revealing too much. I typed out 2 short sentences. Marcus is not who you think he is. You are in danger. I attached nothing. I signed no name. I just hit send, my heart hammering against my ribs. The waiting was agony. Every second that ticked by was a second he could be reading my words over her shoulder. The reply came 3 hours later, and it was exactly what I had feared. I know who this is, she wrote, her words dripping with hostile condescension. Marcus warned me you were unstable. This is pathetic. Get a life and leave us alone, you jealous, crazy wife. The words stung, but I had expected them. I was the villain in the story he told her. I couldn't reason with her. I had to show her. I took a deep breath and opened the press release draft, the one announcing my own memorial foundation. I took a screenshot of the section listing the founding board members, my name at the top as the honoree, and hers, Amelia's, right below it. I didn't add any text. I just attached the image to my reply and hit send. And then, silence. Hours turned into a full day. The lack of a response was more terrifying than her anger. Had she shown him? Were they laughing at me together? Was he accelerating his plan? Every creak of the house, every passing car sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me. I was living on a knife's edge, trapped in a house with a man who wanted me dead, waiting for a verdict from a woman who hated me. The next evening, 24 hours after my last email, my burner phone buzzed with a notification. A new message. I opened it with trembling hands. The email was from her, and it contained only a single, stark, terrifying word. Where? The game had changed. I had an audience. Now, I just had to pray she was on my side. I chose a place that was loud, crowded, and completely anonymous, a bustling coffee shop in the city's financial district during the lunchtime rush. I sat at a small table in the back corner, my burner phone clutched in my hand, my back to the wall. Every person who walked through the door sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline through me. I didn't know if I was waiting for an ally or walking into an ambush. And then I saw her. Amelia. She was even more beautiful in person. But the warm, confident smile from her photograph was gone. In its place was a pale, haunted look. Her eyes, wide and frightened, scanned the crowded room until they met mine. She walked toward my table, her movements stiff, jerky. She looked like a woman walking to her own execution. She sat down without a word, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. "You're Clara," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the din of the espresso machine and the chatter of the lunch crowd. "And you're Amelia," I replied, my own voice equally quiet. "Thank you for coming." "I almost didn't," she said, her eyes darting around the room, as if she expected to see him standing in a corner watching us. I thought it was a trick. A fake, but that press release? "My name, it's real," I said, my voice flat, dead. All of it. I saw the last vestiges of denial crumble in her eyes. She finally truly believed it. And the reality of what that meant, that the charming, tragic man she had fallen in love with was a monster, that she was being groomed not for a wedding, but for a supporting role in a murder plot, was a truth so horrifying it seemed to suck the air right out of her lungs. He told me you were unstable," she stammered, "that you were prone to dramatic episodes." "I'm sure he did," I said, a bitter, humorless laugh escaping my lips. "That's the story, isn't it? The one he needs everyone to believe." We sat in silence for a moment, two women from completely different worlds, now inextricably linked by the same man's horrifying, narcissistic plot. Then she leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. "He asked me for a favor," she said, her voice dropping even lower. "A few days ago, he asked if I would provide him with an alibi. For this coming weekend, my blood ran cold." "An alibi?" She nodded, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. "He said you were getting more and more unpredictable, and he was worried you might cause some drama. He wanted me to be able to tell people that I was with him, on a business trip, in case you did something crazy. He made it sound like he was protecting me. So that was it. The final piece. While he was pushing me off a cliff on Devil's Ridge, his alibi would be 100 miles away, a loving girlfriend ready to testify to his whereabouts. It was perfect. It was airtight. And it was happening this weekend. A new, more urgent terror seized me. He was accelerating the timeline. I must have done something small and subconscious to tip him off. My smile must have been a little too brittle, my movements a little too tense. He had sensed the shift in the atmosphere, and now the countdown had begun. "We have to go to the police," Amelia whispered, her eyes wide with panic. "No," I said, my voice suddenly sharp, clear. "We can't. Not yet." I saw the confusion on her face and leaned forward, explaining the brutal logic of our situation. "Amelia, think about it. What do we have? A collection of digital files that my sister downloaded. A story from a jealous, crazy wife. He's a respected, powerful man. We walk into a police station right now and he will bury us. He will twist this entire thing around and make us look like the villains. We can't beat him in his world by his rules. We have to beat him in his own story. We have to use his own plan against him." A flicker of understanding and then a new kind of fear dawned in her eyes. She knew I was right. We were two women with a fantastic, unbelievable story against a man who had spent a lifetime curating his own flawless narrative. We couldn't just tell the truth. We had to prove it, beyond any shadow of a doubt. And the only way to do that was to walk willingly into his trap. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in controlled panic. My sister Maya became our virtual mission commander. From her apartment 1,000 miles away, she coordinated everything. We had a new mission, not just to survive, but to build a cage for the monster, using his own blueprints. Our first move was to hire a private investigator. Maya found the perfect man for the job, a grizzled retired police detective named Frank, who had a reputation for being discreet, thorough, and completely unimpressed by powerful men like Marcus. In a hushed, frantic phone call from my burner, I explained the entire situation to him. I expected him to be skeptical. Instead, he just grunted. "Yeah, I've seen this kind of thing before," he'd said, his voice a gravelly rumble. "The ones who think they're smarter than everyone else. They're the easiest to catch. They love to talk." Frank became the linchpin of our plan. He immediately pulled up the maps for Devil's Ridge, the same ones I'd seen in Marcus's binder. He identified the scenic overlook from the notes. He mapped out access routes, surveillance points, and most importantly, the exact spot where local law enforcement would have the best chance of intervening without being seen. The next piece of the puzzle was the most terrifying. The wire. Maya overnighted a package to a private mail drop I'd set up. Inside, nestled in a box of cookies, was a tiny high-fidelity microphone, the kind journalists use for undercover work. It was no bigger than a grain of rice. The plan was for me to sew it into the lining of my sports bra. I would be the bait. I would be the recording device. The night before the trip, I sat in my locked bathroom, practicing. I spoke in a low, conversational tone, replaying the recording on my laptop, listening for any rustle of fabric, any telltale sign of the microphone. I had to be perfect, natural. My life depended on it. Every beat of my heart felt like a drum against the tiny device, and I was convinced he would be able to hear it. Meanwhile, Amelia had her own role to play. She had to become the perfect, loving, unwitting accomplice. She called Marcus, her voice a flawless performance of affection and support. Frank recorded the entire call. "I've booked my flight for the conference, darling," she cooed. "I'll be gone all weekend, just like we planned. No one will even know I'm in town." It was a brilliant, chilling performance. She was confirming her role as his alibi, locking him into his own lie, all while creating a piece of evidence that proved her own innocence. The final piece of the plan was the most crucial. The goal wasn't just to stop him. It wasn't just to record him threatening me. That would still be his word against mine. The goal was to get him to confess. We needed him in his own arrogant, monologuing voice to lay out the entire plot. We needed him to explain why. Frank was clear about this. We needed to get his motive on tape. Men like him, Frank had said, his voice grim, they can't resist explaining their own genius. You just have to give them the stage. And so the stage was set. The players were in position. I was the lead actress in a play I hadn't written, walking willingly toward a final scene that had been designed to be my death. And as I packed my hiking bag the next morning, Marcus watching me with his perfect, loving smile, I had never felt more terrified or more in control in my entire life. The drive upstate was 3 hours of the most agonizing, surreal normalcy I have ever experienced. Marcus put on a playlist of our favorite songs from college. He held my hand as we drove, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my skin, the same way he'd done on our first date. He talked about his work, about a deal he was closing, about the future. And I sat there, a tiny microphone sewn into the fabric of my bra, my heart a frantic, trapped bird in my chest, and I played along. I was the perfect, loving wife, excited for our anniversary getaway. The trailhead for Devil's Ridge was deserted, just as his notes had predicted. A single, dusty sign pointed up a narrow path that disappeared into a thick forest of pine and shadow. The air was cool and crisp, smelling of damp earth and pine needles. It was breathtakingly beautiful. And absolutely menacing. We started to hike. The path was steep, and the silence between us was broken only by the crunch of our boots on the gravel and our own ragged breaths. With every step, I could feel the tiny microphone against my skin, a cold, hard reminder of the role I was playing. "It's beautiful up here, isn't it?" I said, my voice sounding unnaturally bright. "So peaceful." "I knew you'd love it," he replied, not even out of breath. "It feels like we're the only two people in the world." The path grew narrower, the drop-off to our right more severe. Far below, the trees looked like a dense green carpet. It was a long, long way down. Now or never, Clara. This is your stage. I stopped, pretending to catch my breath, and turned to him. I tried to make my eyes look soft, full of the love he thought he still owned. You know, I began, my voice a carefully crafted whisper. Being up here with you, it makes me think about things. About our future, about everything. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. What would you do if something happened to me, Marcus? I mean, a freak accident or something? Would you be okay? He stopped and turned to face me. A strange, philosophical look came over his face, the look of a man about to impart some great, universal wisdom. The monologue was beginning. That's a strange question, he said, his voice soft, almost hypnotic. But I believe that some things are just fated. That life is a story, and every story has chapters. And for a new chapter to begin, the old one has to end. It's not about being okay. It's about understanding the necessity of the narrative. Some things, Clara, some things are just necessary for the greater good. He was enjoying this. The arrogance, the God complex. Frank was right. He couldn't resist explaining his own genius. He took my hand, his grip a little too tight, and started walking again, pulling me along. Come on, he said, a new, eager energy in his voice. There's a scenic overlook just up here. I've read about it. The view is supposed to be unforgettable. He led me around a sharp bend in the trail, and there it was. The spot from his notes. A small rocky outcrop that jutted out over the vast empty expanse of the valley. The edge was a crumbling, unstable mess of loose rock and scree, exactly as his plan had described. It was a perfect ready-made accident. And as he led me toward that crumbling edge, a strange, cold calm washed over me. The actress was gone. The frightened wife was gone. All that was left was a survivor, ready for the final scene. We stood on the edge of the world, a biting wind whipping my hair across my face. Marcus dropped my hand and walked to the very edge of the crumbling precipice, turning his back to the 1,000-foot drop. He looked serene, peaceful. He was a director, standing on his set, preparing for the final dramatic shot. He looked at me, and for the first time, the mask was gone. The charming, loving husband had vanished, and in his place was a complete stranger, his eyes cold, his expression one of detached, philosophical appraisal. He wasn't looking at his wife. He was looking at a problem to be solved. You were perfect for Act 1, Clara, he said, his voice calm, conversational, as if we were discussing the plot of a movie. Truly, you play the part of the supportive, beautiful wife flawlessly, but the story, it needs to move forward. It needs a new dynamic, a new tragedy. I just stared at him, my heart a slow, heavy drum against the tiny microphone. I was no longer acting. I was just bearing witness. The debt, he continued, a faint dismissive wave of his hand. That's just a logistical issue. The insurance money will solve that quite elegantly. It's a clean, efficient solution. He paused, a small, almost wistful smile playing on his lips. And then there's Amelia. She's perfect for Act 2. She understands the importance of legacy, of building something that will last. He took a step toward me, his movements slow, deliberate. I will be the grieving husband, of course, he said, his voice dropping into a tone of theatrical sincerity. Devastated, but resilient. I will channel my grief into your foundation, the one we'll build in your name. You'll be immortalized, Clara, a tragic, beautiful memory. It's a much better ending for your character than simply fading away. He was only a few feet from me now. I could smell the faint, expensive scent of his cologne, the same scent that used to make me feel safe. Don't fight it, he said, his voice a soft, soothing whisper. It will be over in a second, a slip. A tragic accident, just make it easy. He took one final step, his hand reaching out, not to grab me, but as if to gently guide me toward the edge. And in that moment, from the dense thicket of trees just to our left, a voice, hard as iron, cut through the wind. That's far enough, Marcus. Marcus froze, his head whipped around. His face, a moment ago so full of smug, godlike superiority, completely collapsed. It was a rapid, stunning transformation, from predator to cornered animal in the space of a single heartbeat. Frank, the private investigator, stepped out from the trees, a grimly satisfied look on his face. And beside him, a local sheriff, his hand resting on the butt of his holstered pistol. The color drained from Marcus's face. His eyes darted from the sheriff to Frank and then to me. And in my eyes, he saw not the terrified, fragile wife he had written into his script, but a complete stranger. He saw the woman who had just beaten him at his own game. He was trapped. His perfect narrative, his flawless, curated story had been hijacked. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The genius, the puppet master, was speechless. I took a slow, deliberate step back from the crumbling edge, my hand instinctively going to my chest to the tiny, hidden microphone that had just captured his confession. I looked him right in the eye, and for the first time in weeks, my voice was perfectly, completely steady. It's over, Marcus. And in the profound silence that followed, I knew that this wasn't just the end of his story. It was the beginning of mine. The aftermath was a whirlwind of flashing lights and legal jargon. Marcus didn't rage, he didn't protest. He just deflated. The puppet master with his strings suddenly cut was just a hollow, empty man. The sheriff put him in handcuffs, the cold, metallic click echoing in the mountain air. It was the sound of a chapter, of an entire book slamming shut. The legal fallout was swift and brutal. The recording from the wire was perfect, a pristine, undeniable record of his confession. Combined with the digital evidence Maya had uncovered, and the corroborating testimony from a shaken but resolute Amelia, Marcus had no story left to tell. The media frenzy was intense for a few weeks. The banker and the binder, one headline dubbed it. But like all stories, it eventually faded, leaving just the quiet, unchangeable reality of his conviction. Conspiracy to commit murder. He was sentenced to 25 years to life. His perfect narrative had ended in a prison cell. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. I couldn't. The house, our beautiful curated house, was no longer a home. It was a crime scene, a stage. I hired a company to come in and pack everything. I told them to be ruthless. I didn't want the furniture, the art, the perfectly organized books. I didn't want any of it. Every object was a prop from a life that had been a lie, and I wanted it all gone. I sold the house for the first offer I got, and I never looked back. I stayed with my sister Maya for a while. The first time I saw her, she just wrapped her arms around me and held on for a long time. There were no "I told you so's." There was no judgment. "You did it," she whispered into my hair, her voice thick with emotion. "You survived," and she was right. I had survived. The woman who had been so terrified of disrupting the perfect picture, who had willfully ignored the cracks in the facade for a decade, she was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who had walked into the monster's trap and emerged from the other side, not unscathed, but unbroken. A few months later, I found myself standing in the grand, echoing hall of a train station. I had a single suitcase at my feet and a one-way ticket in my hand. The ticket had no destination. I hadn't decided yet. For the first time in my life, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a script. I looked up at the huge black departure board, at the flickering letters and numbers that represented 100 different possible futures. For so long, I had been a character in a story someone else was writing, my every move dictated by the needs of his narrative. But now, the page was blank, a faint, small smile touched my lips. I picked up my suitcase, the handle cool and solid in my hand. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of freedom and diesel and unknown adventures. And I walked toward the trains, ready, finally, to write my own story.